Hey everyone, this is the story of religion from its birth, infancy to the world domination and perhaps its demise. Religion has gone through 5 distinct phases or updates as human software. In its early infancy, it was animistic among hunter-gatherers or religion 1.0. Then forming transformed it into a competitive league of polytheism or religion 2.0. Then came monotheism or religion 3.0, making it a lethal weapon of world domination and conquest. Then came religion of rationality, where world domination was finally achieved through science and reason, which led to psychotherapy and medicine as religion 4.0. And finally, today we are heading towards a new software, AI combined with algorithm and science embed with storytelling, turning into a religion 5.0. In this video, I'll answer these questions. How did religion come about, evolve, and shape humans? What are the biological, sociological, psychological, and philosophical explanations of religion? And what are the differences between Eastern and Western religions? And finally, why does religion still persist in the age of science and reason? The video is divided into 5 main sections, and each section into 2 lectures focusing on a particular topic. In section 1, I'll discuss the biological base of religion and God, answering questions like what is religion and how it came about, and what is the concept of God. Why is religion like a detective whodunit story? In section 2, I'll discuss religion as a tool of survival among our nomadic hunter-gatherer ancestors. Animism celebrates life and believes in a hidden energy, just like modernity, which runs on electricity. In section 3, I'll discuss religion's sociological purposes among settled farmers. Religion is not only a practical tool for survival, but it's also a tool for conflict resolution and harmonious coexistence. It acts as a glue that keeps a large swath of people together around a single fire pit. In section 4, we discuss the psychological purpose of religion as to how it explains life and death. Agriculture allowed the accumulation of resources, but unfortunately life is pretty short to enjoy all that wealth, so religions try to expand life into afterlife. I'll discuss the 2 main approaches, Eastern cyclical and Western linear explanations. In section 5, I'll discuss the historical purpose of religion and how it led to modernity, which has tried to replace faith with reason. But despite science debunking some important religions' explanations of life, religion still persists. But why? By the end of this video, you will understand how religion has evolved in the last 50 years of human history and how Homo sapiens have struggled with the meaning of life and death. And we still do. So get yourself some cold coffee and a warm blanket, and let's talk religion. By the way, if you want to buy the script of this video in a book format, you can find the link down below. This also supports the channel, so thank you very much. 1. What is religion? Invisible forces. Every human being experiences 3 mysteries which do not have simple answers. We all dream, but why? We all die, but why? And we all experience natural disasters, illnesses, and tragic events, but why? If something cannot be explained rationally, what is the next best answer? We tell a story, one of the most powerful tools we have in our evolutionary arsenal. Storytelling animal. The Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung's theory of the collective unconscious presented archetypes, symbols, myths, and presence in all cultures which are molded inside us prior to our birth. Archetype refers to cultural artifacts, archaic remnants, or primordial images fossilized in our unconscious mind, found among all people from all cultures, passed down from our earliest common ancestors, perhaps the early Homo sapiens. These archetypes are repeated characters present in all religions, mythologies, art, literature such as fairy tales, as well as epics and stories. In other words, archetypes are like templates or software for us to understand our own experiences in life. For example, when we hear a story, we subconsciously compare ourselves to the characters. If our DNA is the memory of our genes, the archetypes are our collective cultural memories. From a very early age, children are mesmerized by stories. Why? Because stories teach us about the world through the victories and failures of heroes and villains. Some examples Jung gives us are the wise old man, the wise old woman, the hero, the father, the mother, the devil, and the divine. Stories have a very powerful function for our survival. Through storytelling, we emotionally bond with others. Faced with an uncertain, dangerous world full of predators and challenges, stories teach us how to overcome those challenges. If history is told by the victors, stories are told by the survivors. That makes stories extremely powerful in our evolutionary history because a person may survive through his or her own ingenuity or resourcefulness, but a community needs a glue to bond all its members. How do you glue people together? Stories and myths, which give you goosebumps, sends you shivers through your spine, and raise the hair on your back. Stories excite you and motivate you. A good analogy is computer, which is made of three main parts: hardware, software, and network. The human body is the hardware. Storytelling is the software, which includes our beliefs. Network is how these beliefs and stories are shared among people in all society. So how is it connected to religion? Well, religion is the network. The simple answer is that religion and stories are inseparable. Most tribes, communities, societies, even empires were built upon shared stories and common myths. Without a common myth, it's hard to unite an empire or a community. If the forest is where giants live, Jung argued that storytelling is where archetypes live. So every religion has a great story that convinced a tribe, then an empire. Life is like a crime novel. We all seek answer as to who did what and why. How has life come about? Of course, today science is trying to answer these questions, but in the olden days of our early ancestors, things were explained through stories. Modern novelists start with their murder mystery with a terrible incident, for example, a dead body, therefore forcing the reader to find out who has done it. The climax is when we find out and you're relieved. Religion and religious myths are basically the climax of life's mysteries. Religion is a whodunit story with a persuading answer. Early humans faced with a few fundamental mysteries: natural disasters, dreams, illnesses, and, of course, death. Why does nature erupt, earth shakes, water surges, and wind turns in storms? Why do we dream? And most crucially, why do we get sick and die? To answer these mysteries, humans invented stories which over time turned into religious beliefs. Thus, religion was born. Whenever there's a mystery, there's always a story to be told. Imagine early humans trying to explain mysterious events like earthquakes, floods, volcanoes, storms, wildfire without knowing the scientific and geological causes. Since no human or animal is strong enough to cause these natural disasters, the logical conclusion is that there must be an entity more powerful than humans and animals. 1. Natural disasters. Early humans perhaps sitting inside a dark cave with their detective goggles on to solve these mysteries. For instance, among the Native Americans, the myth of 7 turtles explains earthquakes. When the animals get tired of holding the weight of the land, it shifts its body and the world shakes. According to Japanese mythology, earthquakes are caused by a giant catfish who lives beneath the earth. According to Hawaiian mythology, a quick-tempered goddess called Pele causes volcanoes to erupt. Not to be confused with the Brazilian footballer who also caused eruption among his fans. For example, the sandrock paintings in modern-day Zimbabwe dated as far back as 50,000 years ago, depicting animals, humans, and even hybrids, which tell stories of a creator god called Kagen, who takes different forms, like a human as well as praying mantis. These paintings tell a story of how natural events are caused by some powerful people, often humans' early ancestors. In other words, to explain what's happening now is attributed to those who came before. So, to explain nature's events, early humans needed stories which turned into religious myths, and that became the basis of an organized religion. So, what are some other mysteries humans faced? 2. Dreams. The San people also believed that life was a dream, dreamt by the god Kagen. Today, some scientists believe our world is a simulation, which is basically we live inside someone else's dreamt up world. Leo Tolstoy famously said that life is a dream and death is waking up. This idea that the world is dreamt by somebody else is believed among Aborigines of Australia too. They believe that we are actually living the dream right now. Our paths are shaped by the primal people who basically clears the path for us as we go about in this dreaming world. It's interesting to point out that modern psychology was born out of the same mystery. In fact, Sigmund Freud worked heavily on explaining why we dream and what our dreams mean. So no surprise that even the modern religion of psychotherapy was somewhat based on this mystery. 3. Death. Perhaps the biggest mystery in life is death. The Maori people in New Zealand have an interesting story that explains death. When the world was formed, death didn't exist. The Sky Father and the Earth Mother were living an immortal life, which to this day the Sky and Earth are still alive. But when the Sky God and Earth Goddess had a baby, one of their sons wanted to sleep with his mother. So perhaps Freud was onto something as he based his theory of the Oedipus complex, in which children subconsciously or unconsciously desire the parents of the opposite sex. In our Maori myth, the boy's father, the sky god, said, "No son, that is my wife. Aren't you ashamed to sleep with your own mother, for God's sake?" So the son decided to create a woman for himself from mud. They had a baby girl, and when she grew up into a stunningly beautiful lady, her father also slept with her. Not only that, they got married and had several children. Oh boy. Once it was revealed to her that her husband was actually her own father, she wanted the earth to open up and swallow her. To escape the shame, she crawled underground to the underworld. That's where we all end up after we die. Hence, death became a thing. What happened to the children who were the result of their incest? Well, the father, who happened to be their grandpa as well, remained above the ground in the sunlight. And the mother, who was also their sister, who had crawled below ground, came to a custody arrangement. The father would raise the kids in the sun, and the mother would drag them down into the darkness. This was how death was created. The father nurtures you while you're alive, and the mother nurtures you while you're dead. So, the origin of death was an incest between a father and daughter, and the shame that it caused. In Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the origin story is the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve were chilling, but when the snake came to fool Eve into eating the forbidden fruit, Adam was fooled by Eve. God kicked him out of the garden and told them, "To the street you shall return." So humans were exiled on earth until we return to heaven or hell. But you can only return to heaven after you die. So every religion has a neat little story that explains life and death. So to conclude this segment, religion is an answer to mysteries early humans faced. Nature often didn't make sense to our ancestors, so religion came along to explain in a way that it made sense. In an attempt to explain mysteries such as natural disasters, dreams, and death, religion offered simple yet effective answers which people believed. Just as some of the greatest modern stories, i.e. novels, films, or TV shows like Star Wars, have become so widespread that they become legendary and mythical. Early great stories too became legendary and mythical, which became the basis of religions. Just as there is a myth that certain TV shows like The Simpsons can predict future events, these early myths were also able to predict events which cemented these stories to be true, hence people believed them. Even today, believers of religions and trying to convince you always point to things that their religion got right in the light of modern science. So these early myths solidified themselves into concrete religious beliefs over time. Just as we're born into a language of not our choosing, we are also born into a religion of not our choosing. So religion became the glue that kept everyone together. Not only explained the mysteries of life and nature, it also offered psychological motivation when we had a boxing match with another tribe. offered comfort when we lost the match. Religion is like a coach who teaches you, motivates you, and then comforts you. It's a winning formula. Just as the stories have an author, heroes, religion also has a creator and heroes. A creator is somebody who actually builds things. So in the next segment, I'll discuss the concept of God. Two, what is God? Previously, I discussed how religion was our first attempt to answer the many mysteries of life, like why natural disasters occur, why we dream, and why we die. So in this segment, we discuss the most important concept in all religions. The concept of God is so central to religion that it's like you cannot have a house without a builder. So why was God so fundamental to early humans? The German anthropologist Ludwig Feuerbach, in his 1841 book The Essence of Christianity, has a very simple answer. He argued that we humans are not created by God, but it is the reverse. Humans created God. He looked at the characteristics we associate with God, like compassion, universal love, all-knowing, and all-powerful. If you look carefully, these are nothing but unfulfilled human desires. I wish I were the most powerful person in the world. I wish I lived forever. I wish I knew everything. I wish and I wish. Feuerbach concluded that God is the projections of human desires, qualities we wish we had. So for Feuerbach, God is a decorated and fully specced out human being with unlimited RAM, unlimited GPU, unlimited CPU, and unlimited storage. Why do we need that? Because despite the fact that it's a physical impossibility, human desire is endless. This idea influenced Freud's theory of human psyche too. Our unfulfilled childhood urges, desires, and memories either come and haunt us later in life or turn us into great storytellers, artists, and business people. So, God is a goal, a perfection that motivates humans to aspire for higher things in life. Also, no coincidence that Freud started his own religion called psychotherapy, today with millions of people visiting their therapy churches on a weekly or monthly basis. We all have unfulfilled urges and wishes. If you can't achieve them, at least you can talk about them. So, God or gods are created in the image of man. To understand, let's look at how early humans saw themselves, or how they defined humans. God has 4 distinct roles in religions, and each of these roles are roles held by humans. A. Toolmakers. First, humans are tool makers. Without our tools, we feel like without arms and legs. It is so fundamental to our existence that we shape every new tool, and these new tools shape us. Every piece of technology we have invented has shaped us in some way. Since we are tool makers, we understand that all tools are created by someone. The logical conclusion is that these things that are not created by humans must have been created by a bigger creator or a giant toolmaker who must have also created humans. So who's the ultimate creator? God becomes a necessary concept. In psychology, there is an approach called structuralism, which defines human consciousness as a structure, like a building or a house. This German analytical approach breaks down consciousness into 3 parts. The conscious, the fully lit ground floor, where everything is visible, and subconscious, the one below, a bit dimmer, and finally the unconscious, which sits in the dark underground. So our conscious mind is the tip of the iceberg, or just a pair of binoculars. Our imaginative capabilities sit below in the subconscious and the unconscious world, where giants, monsters, even gods roam around. Also, psychotherapists sit there. So to understand the world, early humans came up with a creator. Imagine you see a house in the desert. You immediately think someone must have built it. In other words, it didn't magically appear there. This way of thinking makes sense because if you believe that things magically appear, you would just chill in your cave and do nothing. So early humans saw the world functioning in a certain way. So they thought someone must have made it that way. God was the ultimate toolmaker. B. parent. Second, every human being has parents. As babies, our parents are our entire world. We rely on them for everything, including feeding us as well as wiping our bottoms. So, our parents are our creators, who not only physically create us after getting drunk, but also emotionally and socially shape our personality into a fully grown human. Of course, today the iPad and the internet do that instead. So who is the ultimate parent? I mean, before the invention of the internet, God was and has been the ultimate parent for as long as humans have been conscious. Early gods were good fathers or good mothers who held your hands as you navigated life. They would help you with your problems, console you when you were sad, looked after you when you were sick, gave you comfort and support when you need it, and just someone who had your best interest in life. Even Turgenev, the Russian novelist, said that once you become a parent, you're in love for life. In other words, nobody loves you more than your parents. So a loving God was necessary in your life, in your old age, and when your own parents were not around. No coincidence that children and babies don't care about religion and don't have religious duties like praying or fasting until they become adults. When you're young, your own parents are your gods. They look after you physically and emotionally. But as adults, human needed God. Just as your own parents get mad at you when you do something bad, God also gets mad and sometimes takes out his belt to punish you. Earlier gods were a bit harsher because life was harsher back then. As humans have evolved softer, so has God become a bit softer. The same is true about modern parents. Except for some tiger parents, most parents are pretty soft. There are many examples of father god and mother goddesses around the world. According to Carl Jung, the archetypes of the mother and the father are the oldest among humans, like the DNA we share with our earliest ancestors. So it makes sense we replace our parents with God, the ultimate authority, as we grow up. If we all have parents, why do we need God? Well, although our parents are wiser than you, stronger than you, have lived longer than you, as you grow up, you notice they have their limits. First, they don't know many things. Although they know more than you when you were younger, their knowledge is very limited and soon you overtake them. Second, while they can be more powerful than you, they are pretty powerless when faced with some illnesses, disasters, or other powerful people. And finally, unfortunately, our parents die. So the notion of God addressed all these shortcomings. God was omniscient, omnipotent, and immortal. In other words, God or gods are all-knowing, almighty, and live forever. If the parents were God 1.0, this new omniscient and omnipotent and immortal God was 2.0. C. Tribal protector. Third, since life is a competition, we compete for food, shelter, mates, and etc., the need to have a strong protector on our side is fundamental. There are times when we're strong enough to defeat others, but when we become weak and cannot defend ourselves, and especially in the absence of a strong parent, we need to rely on a powerful entity to look after us. Just like your parents, other people also had parents. So these parents often fought against each other. The early gods were pretty much like humans, albeit a bit stronger. While they had some great qualities, they also had some flaws. Among early religions, polytheism or multiple gods was a common thing. While there was a hierarchy among these gods, they were also very independent and sometimes they often fought among themselves. This is beautifully depicted in the Greek epic of the Iliad and Odyssey by Homer. There were also opposing gods, each supporting their own tribes. Just as humans competed on the ground, gods too competed in the sky. Today, it's the competition between Ronaldos and Messis. Today, polytheism is more common among isolated small tribes who somewhat live isolated existences. But in more urbanized civilizations like Mesopotamia, Egypt, Persia, which gave rise to vast empires, these conflicts among gods were somehow resolved like the Champions League, to have a single winner at the end. These multiple gods battled among themselves over centuries to result in monotheism. Monotheism is the invention of the great empires. The Persians created the first global empire and incidentally also came up with the concept of a single god in Zoroastrianism. It makes sense. When you have a king of kings, you need to have a god of all gods. One god makes empire building a bit easier because now you are no longer confused which god or team to follow. Now you have one and everyone follows him. So religions like Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are monotheistic religions, all coming from the same region, while religions like Hinduism is polytheistic. Over time, monotheism basically conquered most of the world. Now, Islam and Christianity combined make up more than half of the world's population, with 4.3 billion followers, or 55% of the world population. In the same way that big clubs like Barcelona and Real Madrid are worshipped by more people than the other 50 clubs combined. But the solo god without another rival is pretty boring. So we have to have another entity that counterbalances the good god, just as we need Barcelona to challenge Real Madrid. We have Satan, or the devil, or other team. So most religions do have a devil figure who is the bad guy, like a bad influencer who tells you to do naughty things. Aside from polytheism and monotheism, there are also religions with no god. For instance, Buddhism is atheistic in that it doesn't believe in the concept of God or permanent soul. Born from Hinduism, Buddhism believes that the reality we envisage is illusion, and gods are just part of that illusion we have created. The only thing that is real is consciousness and now. Buddhists do believe in reincarnation. In other words, when we die, we are reincarnated as another being, and the goal is to escape this cycle of suffering. Another Indian religion that does not recognize God is Jainism, which puts all the responsibility onto us humans. In other words, you cannot blame God for screwing things up. If something goes wrong, you are responsible. If the world is messy, because we messed it up, not God or devil. D. Ruler. Finally, apart from God being the ultimate toolmaker, the ultimate parent, and the ultimate protector, he is also the ultimate ruler. Human politics can be bloody because we are all self-interested. How do you solve it? You either put someone impartial in charge, but no human is impartial. This means we need an authority who is not human because all humans are partial to their own interest or the interest of their family or tribe. So the concept of God as the ultimate ruler of human society becomes necessary. Someone who is not involved in the petty squabbles among humans. An outsider God is the best answer. And God, well, he's pretty invisible or mostly an absent father. We know he's there, but where? Nobody knows. But don't worry, he sends us messages and letters. Aside from a story, a god, a third element of religion is a rule book. While not all religions have a written book of rules, some religions do, like the Bible, the Quran, the Vedas, the Sutras, etc. All members are required to follow these rules for a safe passage through life, which is a treacherous journey. These rules can be very specific, don't kill or steal, or can be very general, pray or give donations, etc. Some religions have very strict set of rules, like a tiger parent, and other religions are far more relaxed, just like chill parents. So to conclude, religion is not only a great story that explains the mysteries of life, it has also an author, but most importantly, great heroes, all-powerful, wise, and immortal. These early gods battled their way to becoming one almighty hero, followed by half of humanity today. In the next segment, I'll discuss how religion is a tool of survival. As animals, we are at the mercy of a beautiful yet brutal nature. Like a stepmother who raises us with the roughest of hands, religion comes to help us to soften the blows a bit. 3. Animism, tool of survival. In the previous segments, I discussed how religions are great stories that convince people about the mysteries of life. Just like good software, religion also developed the concept of God, a perfect being as a creator, protector, and ruler. Since humans are flawed, God offered us a perfect model, a goal, a destination to aim towards because nature is aimless. But religion has not just been a fancy story with a fancy god, it has been actually a practical tool for our survival. So in this segment, I'll discuss animism, religions that helped us navigate the treacherous journey of life by giving us psychological moral support when all else fails. Today we ask science to solve our problems, but for our early ancestors, they relied on spirits and energy. So animism is our first attempt to harnessing the energy of nature to keep us going. To understand early religions, let me give you two modern references. First, the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche based his philosophy as a celebration of life. He argued that religions like Christianity were knee-deep in its celebration of the afterlife that didn't care about this life. For Nietzsche, even Western philosophy did not celebrate life, but instead intellectualized life with reason. How boring is that? To celebrate life, Nietzsche argued that one must celebrate both reason and passion. Reason gives you foresight, and passion gives you heart to take on immense challenges. So why is Nietzsche relevant? The answer is very simple. Early human religions celebrated life because life was pretty short and precarious, and we couldn't just give up. We had to be heroic and passionate to survive. Second, in physics, the first law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created and cannot be destroyed, but it can be channeled. Early humans understood that there was hidden energy out there. They called it spirit, often found in certain animals, objects like trees, rocks, mountains, waterfalls, and even certain humans. Since early humans lived a nomadic lifestyle as hunter-gatherers, always on the search for some food and shelter, the uncertainty and the unpredictability of survival meant that you relied on good luck to find the next meal or an empty cave. Good luck was celebrated as divine message. Therefore, rituals were created. So early humans developed rituals which we consider superstitious today, connecting certain actions like bowing to a tree, circling a rock, clapping your hands, tying a rope, etc. to good outcomes in your search for food and good fortune or good energy and power. Even today, we do these actions before an important interview, date, or sporting events, which is remnant of our early human ancestors. The earliest religions in the world are animistic. Animism has the same root as the words animal, anime, animate, which means life or spirit. Even to this day, we make distinction between the body and the soul, or the physical being and the spiritual being. So it goes back to our early human forebears who saw a mysterious spirit to be working like some dark energy that ruled over living beings and the universe. This spirit or energy never died, while the physical body decayed and died. Today we call it energy, which powers modernity. Without energy, the modern world would collapse within days. So, animism is a way our natural biological body is speaking to us. We humans use our intellect to understand the world, but getting to know reality also happens through other channels, the body itself. Sometimes you hear people say, "I felt the energy." While this is not scientifically proven, there are many instances of people reporting certain energy or visceral experience which is hard to describe. It's like science doesn't know what dark energy is right now. Since we are from nature, nature has to communicate to us through the body as well as the mind. While the mind uses language to describe experience a bit more precisely, most of our experiences in life are through the body. The body, however, is a bit vaguer, clumsier, and less precise to intellectualize and verbalize. For example, paganism, like all animistic religions, is the belief that we are one and the same with nature. It's our intellect that separates us from nature. But in reality, we are as natural entities as animals, trees, and rocks. Today, science has proved that our body is made up of natural elements like oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen. And no surprise that these elements also make most of the world. Later religions like Christianity put humans separate from nature, which helped us in some way, but also distanced us from nature, which caused us separation anxiety. According to the German psychologist Erich Fromm, our anxiety is because of our separation from nature, which happened thousands of years ago, which resulted in us creating religions and gods to console ourselves. According to Fromm, our second separation happened in modernity. Now, not only we separate from ourselves from nature, but also we separate from other people. So, according to animism, all phenomena, living beings and non-living beings like rock and mountains, have spirit. We can get this spirit to help us if we perform certain actions and rituals. What differentiates animism from other religions is that it is more practical for our survival, therefore relies on rituals and less on ideas and concepts. So our earlier ancestors, to survive in the harsh reality of life, you couldn't rely on beliefs alone. You had to go out there and perform, act, and do things. How to find food, mates, raise children, defend yourself against others, and conquer the world. According to the Ainu belief in northern Japan, the body is simply a container where the spirits reside. Our spirit is more like life energy, which allows us to work, and when we run out or run low on this life energy, or when we anger gods, we must pray, sing a song, make offerings, and conduct ceremonies to bring the spirit or energy back to us so we survive and look after our family. To understand animism, Japan is a perfect case study where people follow two distinct and almost contradictory religions, Shintoism and Buddhism. Shintoism originated in Japan literally means the way of God, is an animistic religion and solely focused on the celebration of this life. Buddhists, on the other hand, almost avoid life and cannot wait to liberate themselves from life. Shintoism believes in winning in this life, while Buddhism believes in losing in this life so you can win in the afterlife. Shinto is about conquering the world, and Buddhism is about conquering the self. Shintoism is ritualistic and action-oriented, while Buddhism is about concept and inaction like meditation. So Shintoism, like many other animistic religions, prioritizes this life, how to survive it, and of course how to conquer it. It had a major influence in modernization of Japan later in its imperialistic wars in the Pacific Ocean, as it emphasizes winning, action, problem-solving, etc. Just as Protestantism helped Northern Europeans to embrace capitalism, Shintoism helped Japan to do the same. When Japan ended its 200 years of isolation and started modernizing in the 1860s and 70s, it also adopted Shintoism as a state religion to promote Japanese nationalism, with the emperor being given the kami or god status, but most importantly to promote industrialization. Buddhists don't believe in being industrious for material gains. One of the most important rituals in Shintoism is the purification ritual called Harai. And to this day, Japan is one of the cleanest countries in the world. And this is also why Shinto priests do not deal with funerals. So interestingly, in Japan, funerals are entirely left to the Buddhists. So there's a saying the Japanese are born Shinto, but they die Buddhist. In other words, when you're young and full of energy, you want to conquer this world when you're Shinto. And once you get old and frail, you turn into Buddhist so you can conquer yourself and deal with the afterlife. So early human religion was a means of solving practical problems of survival. In the same way, when you're young, you're hungry for success in this life. Animism believes that everything has a spirit or energy, which we can channel it towards us through donations, rituals, sacrifices, and prayers. Since this spirit is immortal, it lives on after we die, and this helps those who come after us. So animism is basically felt religion, something you feel with your own bone in your body. It's not reliant on too much on your intellectual capacity, but more on your physiological necessity of survival and communication through your body. It's like when you hear music, we cannot intellectualize that sensation, but music hits a chord deep inside us. Today, animism lives inside all of us through certain superstitions we hold. A certain item of clothes or a certain ritual helps us deal with uncertain events in our lives, like an important date, a job interview, or even our favorite sports winning in their next match. So despite centuries of progress in scientific education, we still hold animistic beliefs. So early human religions were tools of survival. Therefore, they didn't focus on afterlife. Instead, they focused on rituals and actions, not so much thoughts and concepts, because abstract ideas like afterlife couldn't feed your empty stomach. And early animistic religions didn't separate humans from nature, but saw it as one thing. Just as modernity runs on electricity, early animistic religions believed in energy or spirits running the world. Today, if we remove electricity, the modern world becomes paralyzed. So one could argue that even our early ancestors were looking forward to the day when energy could be harvested as effectively as it is done today. In the next segment, I'll discuss how animistic religions communicated with the dead through shamanism and offered blood sacrifice to appease the hungry gods. Four, animism, shield of protection. In the previous segment, I discussed how early animistic religions like Shintoism saw the world run on spirits or energy, and to harness the good spirits, certain rituals were necessary. Religions like Shintoism mainly focused on celebrating survival, not death. In this segment, I'll focus on how animistic religions dealt with the dead. Apart from food and shelter, our nomadic ancestors struggled with two other elements they couldn't control: traveling in time and traversing long distances. Since they had to move long distances, sometimes they had to leave their loved ones behind. Also, time travel is not possible, so animism took those problems into account to create ways you could communicate with those far away and long gone. We crave the ability to talk to those who have passed away or those who live in distant lands. To solve this, humans came up with shamanism, which is still prevalent in the vastly expansive regions of Northern Europe, Russia, and Canada, where people live somewhat isolated lives. A. Communicate with the dead. Shamanism is still practiced in the coldest parts of the world, like among the Siberian tribes, the Canadian Inuits, the Vikings, and the Samis in Finland, and the Mongolians. In shamanism, certain individuals, i.e. the shamans, are chosen ones who have a great power to time travel or travel to another world in order to bring back information, knowledge, cure for illnesses, and other solutions to humans' survival problems. But why do we need that? In a world where there is no writing to keep memories past a few generations, you need a way to access the old people's wisdom when it comes to solving problems. One of the saddest things about humanity is that the most skilled, the wisest, and the most altruistic people die. And they take all their skills and knowledge which they spent a lifetime to acquire with them to the grave. Among early humans, when someone got sick, you had to rely on the wisdom of the elders. Or you ask a shaman to seek cure by going through a trance-like state called vision quest, when they leave their body and go on a spiritual journey to access the spirits which cure sickness. So being a healer is one of the primary roles of the shamans, who are able to communicate between different realms of reality. To be able to do that, the shamans have to prepare their body for this journey by walking in the freezing cold temperature, intense dance or music, or taking some psycho-altering mushroom or alcoholic beverage, perhaps to loosen them up, to make it easier for them to shake the current reality out of them. To facilitate this precarious journey, others offer the shaman some offerings of gift, but most importantly, guard them to make sure they wake up. I personally witnessed a shaman quest in Mongolia. Sitting inside a very cold yurt, the shaman was a young man who started drinking alcohol, and after a few minutes, his voice changed as though he was a different person. I couldn't understand the language, but several people came to ask about their problems and get information about their loved ones. This went for hours. Shamanism is particularly popular among the nomadic people who move constantly from place to place. This is why you need someone who can travel through consciousness or in time. As nomads move, they often bury their loved ones behind. This requires you to have a way to be in touch with them and when you're no longer near them. So for early humans, when your parents died, they went somewhere because how could they abandon you? It just didn't make sense, and the people who loved you the most couldn't really leave you without protection. So shamanism was a way to be in touch with them so they could still help you in this life. Since animism believes that spirits never die, just as modern physics states that energy is always conserved, early humans found a way to communicate with the spirits of those who passed away. This is why animistic religions made it part of their religious mission to communicate with the dead and get solution to their problems from those who passed away, because it's all about survival. Since the dead are not really dead in animistic religions, they also need nourishment. So how can you feed the dead? B. Appease the dead. Evolution is blind. Living organisms blindly throw a hook until they catch something to climb on. Then it moves in that direction until it reaches a burning fire, which kills it. Then another organism tries it again and finally finds water. This evolutionary process of trial and error continues for thousands and millions of years. Also, for a species to survive, the death of the individual plants and the individual animal is not important. In religious evolution, there are dark episodes where humans took things to the extreme. The most famous example is the blood sacrifice, which existed in every part of the world. As a tribal species, humans have always valued courage and self-sacrifice, especially on the battlefield and against enemies. But then the idea of sacrifice itself became a thing in itself, resulting in sacrificial rituals even in peacetime to prevent future wars and act as a deterrent. In the Americas, this question of dead ancestors took a very sinister turn. Now, the dead ancestors or the gods were not there to help us, but we are here to help them. In other words, we need to return the favor by killing some of our own people to please our ancestors and gods. Among the Incas, the Aztecs, and the Mayans, blood sacrifice became an important religious ritual. So in order to continue receiving help from our ancestors, the Andean tribes of Incas believed that the land which they cultivated needed blood and fat. To achieve this, human sacrifice was necessary. So they would sacrifice elderly people, outcasts, criminals, and even their own children to appease the spirits of their dead ancestors so they keep their land fertile. Since the land was passed down from their ancestors, you become the borrower of the land. How do you pay your ancestors who are not there? When you borrow money from a bank or a lending agency, you pay interest. But our early ancestors paid the interest by cutting someone's arms and bleeding them to death. Today, if you borrow money from the mafia and fail to pay, they come and do that for you. So the animistic religions of South America did the sacrifice preemptively so the dead ancestors wouldn't get mad at them and inflict disasters on them. This is why most of us pay our credit card debt on time. Otherwise, the penalty would be too high. Further north in Central America, first among the Mayans and later among the Aztecs, this blood sacrifice became not of a cult of dead ancestors worship, but it was done in the name of the gods. Here, the belief was that while creating humans, the world and the sun, the gods had to work really hard, shedding sweat, blood, and tears, so much so that they turned pale as they were running out of blood. Now it's incumbent upon us to return the favor by bleeding ourselves to donate blood back to the gods. The gods, as well as the sun, didn't need money or food. They needed your blood because they lost their blood by creating humans. The Red Cross bus was busy looking for volunteers, but not everyone was volunteering themselves. So the Mayans and the Aztecs turned to those who had no autonomy of choice. They mainly sacrificed prisoners of wars, slaves, and children. The ritual was performed by priests. A group of priests would hold the victim from 4 limbs and then cut their heart, believing that the heart came from the sun's energy. So basically returning it back to the sun. This became so widespread that in 1487, just 5 years before Columbus reached the Americas, it is believed that some 20,000 to 80,000 people were sacrificed by the Aztecs alone. Usually these people were captured from other tribes during wars. While some animistic religions like Shintoism in Japan are all about celebrating this life, others, like the ones in Central America, are all about sacrificing people to appease the gods and the ancestors. However, it's not exclusive to the Americas. Blood sacrifice or blood ritual was widely practiced throughout the world. Even in the Christian and Islamic myth, Abraham wanted to sacrifice his own son. Later on, instead of humans, animals were sacrificed, and to this day, Muslims sacrifice a goat or a sheep when they attend the Hajj pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia. Blood sacrifice was common in ancient Egypt and China, which can be seen in the Chinese writing system. Since blood was always associated with life and life energy, as the most precious thing, it was also offered to the dead and the god. Animistic religions have survived in the cold, hostile, and remote parts of the world, while in the rest of the world, animism was replaced by more sophisticated religions like Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism. The myth of Abel and Cain perhaps symbolizes the transition from hunting to farming, as the farmer Cain kills the hunter Abel. So animism is basically religion 1.0. Most animistic religions don't have a written text, no prophet, or sophisticated philosophy. In other words, animism is less concerned with beliefs, ideas, philosophy, but more concerned with actions, rituals, and offerings, which are tangible. It is more animated than contemplative, more active than thoughtful, more practical than idealistic or philosophical. So animism relied on energy or spirit, which could be channeled in order to enhance life, just as we do with electricity today. In some cases, animism channeled the energy to communicate with the dead, heal illnesses, predict the future, as in shamanism, or concentrated the energy through purification rituals, as in Shintoism. But sometimes this energy turned into dark energy when the blood of some humans were spilled to give energy back to gods or ancestors. So animism and modern capitalism have a lot in common. In the next segment, we will move away from the mere survival of the nomadic hunter-gatherers to the religions of the settled farmers. Nomads tend to move on when they have a conflict, but settled farmers have to settle the conflict one way or another. Now, religion is not just a mediator between humans and the natural world, but it also does conflict resolution among humans. Five, conflict with others, good versus evil. In the previous segment, I talked about how hunter-gatherer nomads needed help with survival, so their religion was there to give them energy, power, and hope in tough times. Animism helped us to get places, achieve things, and solve problems in order to survive and thrive in a hostile environment. In this segment, we move away from the cold climates to the heart of human civilization. Warmer and more available food through farming, therefore things are far more comfortable and predictable, so humans had the luxury to think beyond this life and worry about afterlife. But most importantly, religion was to cement and glue the empires together. The Middle East is considered the hotbed of human agricultural revolution, which turned hunter-gatherer humans into settled farmers, then large city dwellers, which later turned into empire builders. So obviously the religion had to be more sophisticated, otherwise a simple religion couldn't compete with other more refined religions. Italo Calvino, the Italian writer, said that old folk tales start off like regular rocks with rough edges, but after many retellings, passed down from generation to generation, they come to us refined like smooth pebbles. The same happened to religions. Just as early stone cutting tools turned into precision knives today, old religions collided with other religions in big agricultural towns and cities and empires to become the most sophisticated religions with deep philosophy, sacred texts, robust monuments, and massive followers. So we enter the world of religion 2.0. If animism was a religion of village people, this new religion served to the needs of sophisticated urbanites. Just as the produce that arrived in big cities had to be the cream of the crop, the religion also had to be the smooth and its rough edges removed. Animistic religions didn't care so much about morality. Survival was far more important. But among farming settlers, morality of good and evil played a crucial role in keeping society together. The myth of Abel and Cain is a Middle Eastern myth where the good guy is killed by the bad guy. Hence, the idea of good and evil was born. A. Rivers and pebbles. The Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, 6,000 years ago became the cradle of civilization due to two rivers feeding the agricultural land surrounding them. The Tigris and the Euphrates flow from the Taurus Mountains of Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. The Himalayas had the same effect, feeding great rivers that run through India and China. The Indus River in India, the Yellow and Yangtze River in China sprang up large civilizations with sophisticated religions. So these rivers not only brought fertile soil from the Himalayan mountains, they also brought smooth pebble-like religious ideas which were more refined. But with agriculture also came private property that you were stuck with. If you were a nomad, you could take your herd of animals and move on. But landowners, you were stuck with the land, so you had to fight to defend it. While hunter-gatherer nomads were happy to move on after a fight, landowners didn't have that luxury. So conflict was inevitable. So how did religion help solve these conflicts? Not just among humans, but among competing gods. The Sumerian, the earliest human civilization which dated back to 6,000 years ago, were polytheistic. But how do you know which god to follow? To make it easy, they created a division of labor among gods. Some were in charge of water, some in charge of rain in heaven, and some in charge of fertility. This is very similar to animistic religions. But the Sumerians did something unique. They put gods into a hierarchical order. The Sumerians had an empire which included other kingdoms with their own kings and religions. So they had to create a hierarchy. Just as Sumer king was the king of all other kings, Marduk became the god of all gods. Later, the Greeks had Zeus as the king of all gods. This was later adopted by the Babylonian civilization, which took over the Sumerian civilization. So the god of all gods was conquering force, just as the king of all kings was a victorious king who had conquered others. B. Writing. As cities grow large, our human memory fails to remember everyone's names. But most crucially, we don't know who owes what to whom. It is time we invent something that is kept outside our unreliable human memory. Old stories kept changing because storytellers added things and removed things based on their mood and the audience mood. Now, we got to get a bit more serious. The Sumerians came up with the answer. They decided to create symbols so you could write things down. Writing allowed religious ideas to be written down. This made the religion more solid. Now you didn't need to rely on someone's memory, which is valuable. Now you could write the religious rules and ideas on a clay or a stone tablet and they would last many generations. The oldest written work, the Kish tablets in cuneiform, is 5,500 years old. But it's not a religious text, more like an accounting book for farming. The oldest piece of storytelling, the Epic of Gilgamesh, is Akkadian, but it was actually a Sumerian epic about a king who seeks immortality and then realizes that living forever is not such a great idea. Being stuck on this earth for eternity sounds terrible. Just like great stories, religions too competed to be written on stone tablets. Whoever won the battles to form an empire also became the dominant religion. Now that cities conquered other cities to form huge empires, it was logical to have a single god, just like a single king or a single emperor. Now that we have established a hierarchy among gods, the next logical step is to remove all the superfluous gods and leave one god that does it all. Today, scientists are scrambling for a unified theory of everything. Newtonian physics was the unified theory of matter until Einstein and quantum physics showed up. Einstein's theory of relativity, which explains giant objects, and quantum physics, which explains tiny objects, have irreconcilable differences like a married couple. So scientists today want to have a theory that tells the whole story. So the job of creating a single god who did pretty much everything was left to the ancient Persians. C. Monotheism. Zoroastrianism originated in what is now modern-day Afghanistan or northern Iran by a man named Zerdusht or Zarathustra, as Nietzsche called him, or Zoroaster, who lived between 1400 and 1200 BCE. It is considered the first monotheistic religion worshipping the one god, Mazda, not the Japanese car company, but Ahura Mazda. Nietzsche blamed the fall of humanity to Zarathustra's idea of one God or one truth. Nietzsche thought one God, one truth, and the best truth was repressive to creativity as it removes competition, just like the modern antitrust monopoly of late capitalism. But 3,000 years ago, this idea of a single God was new and revolutionary. So what does it mean? It basically means for the first time, a religion can say it is my way or the highway. Not this pluralism BS, but everyone should come under one umbrella. Now you have a real God, the only God, the truest God. All the other gods are either not real or inferior to this God. Now you could create an empire that lasted for centuries. Guess what? The Persian also came up with another concept, Shahanshah, which means king of all kings. If Mazda was the sky daddy of all other gods, the Persian king was also the earth daddy of all other kings. Zoroastrianism became the dominant religion of all the major Persian empires, including the Median, Achaemenid, Parthian, and later Sasanian Empire. It was replaced by Islam with the fall of Persian Sasanian Empire in 651 CE. Guess what? Islam also believed in one God. Today, there are still practicing Zoroastrians in Iran and India, but a very small group. Zoroastrians believe in three doctrines: good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. Fire is an important element in their worship as it has cleansing power. Control of fire is perhaps one of the biggest human achievements. Cooked food takes less energy and time to digest, so our body and brain become free to do other things, think bigger things, or do more fun activities like creating religion and stories. D. Good and evil. But the most crucial idea of Zoroastrianism was to divide the world into good and evil. The good is represented by Ahura Mazda and the evil by Ahriman. So who to follow is left to us. Why? Because we all have free will. Now you cannot hide behind your parents and shrug off responsibility for your actions. For the first time, perhaps, all humans are equal, equally capable of doing good things or bad things. It is clear-cut choice. You follow Ahura Mazda, you're good, and Ahriman, you're bad. But there cannot be two truths. One has to be superior to the other one. This mathematical approach to religion became the basis of empire buildings in the Middle East and later the basis of Western civilization. Later, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam adopted the one God idea, but also the good versus evil dualism became central to not only the Western religious ideas, but also a lethal political tool. My God is the true God, my people are the true people, and my politics is for the good. So to sum up, agriculture allowed humans to grow in population and live in bigger cities where smaller religions collided to create bigger and more sophisticated religions. Gods too competed with other gods to produce one dominant champion of all gods. Just as empires subdued smaller kingdoms and tribes, the big gods subdued the smaller gods until we have a single god. Today, more than half of the world practices monotheistic religions. Not only that, the basis of Western civilization in which we live is a result of an early monotheism which divided the world into good and evil. In the next segment, I'll move further east to discuss ancient China and India, where they also had set up civilization on their own riverbanks. The Eastern civilizations, however, didn't care about a single god so much because they created a strict social hierarchy among their people. So religions were in harmony with reality. So the conflict is more with the self, not other people. 6. Conflict with the self, hierarchical world. In the previous segment, I discussed how agriculture turned hunter-gatherer nomads into vast civilizations. Instead of searching for food, you grew your food along the soil-rich rivers. Religions also came to the city where they battled until there was one winner. Equipped with the best and the most powerful gods, people built empires and world conquests followed. In this segment, I discuss the Eastern approach to human conflict, which is not to battle with others, but battle with the self. The Eastern approach looked at nature to see how nature deals with conflict. It turns out in nature everything flows. The good and the bad all live in harmony to create an overall balance. So human conflict can be resolved when we create a harmonious yet hierarchical system where everyone knows their place and there is no confusion. A. Flow like river. Taoism, which literally means the way or the way of nature, has its roots in old shamanistic and hermetic traditions in China. Its founder, Lao Tzu or Lao Tzu, lived in 6th century BCE in China, who also authored the book Tao Te Ching or Tao Te Ching, which is a philosophical and religious text. Lao Tzu is said to have lived during the Zhou dynasty, from 1046 to 256 BCE, whose capital was close to the Yellow River, and therefore the river is often used as a metaphor for Taoism. Later in life, Lao Tzu is said to have traveled west, where he wrote Tao Te Ching in some remote mountains, and then vanished into thin air. Also a great metaphor in how to flow in life like a wind or river. Today, Taoism or Taoism remains important and deeply embedded in the culture of China, Korea, and Japan. The core idea of Taoism is the doctrine of Wu Wei, which can be translated as non-resistance or action through inaction. Wei means purposeful and intentional, while Wu means there is no or lack of. So literally it means there is no purposeful act. A good metaphor for humans to live their lives is the river, which the Chinese civilization relied on. Rivers flow downward. If hindered by a rock, instead of moving the rock, it flows around it. This means we should live our lives in alignment or harmoniously with nature, not against nature. Quote, nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. So next time someone stands in front of you, you just walk around them. This is why in China, queuing is not possible because people just move around you to get ahead. Just kidding, it's just a stereotype, not some Chinese religious doctrine. Another important idea of Taoism is yin and yang, which comes close to resembling the Western notion of good and evil. Yin-yang, the dark and the light, are one like night and day. You cannot separate the two. I think this fundamentally differs from Western religion in which good and evil are thought to be separate entities. However, according to Taoism, there are two sides of the same coin. Everything is neither completely negative nor positive, but both. Also, life and death are one and the same thing. Lao Tzu emphasized not to follow one's desire, goals, or ambitions, but rather find your natural flow. Ziran, which literally means naturally, is a Taoist value which emphasizes natural creativity and spontaneity. As a result, Taoism is seen as the religion of the artists who live a more intuitive and spontaneous life that mimics nature's flow. So don't resist nature or others, just flow with them. B. A pyramid scheme. Around the same times as Lao Tzu, there lived another man, Confucius. who took the Taoist natural flow and applied it to how complex society can be organized. In order to minimize social friction or conflict, Confucius, a practical man, drew up his pens and paper to create a blueprint for a socio-political establishment that just worked like a harmonious machine. Instead of looking up to heavens or gods for an answer, Confucius looked down below at nature. He noticed that nature organizes itself, especially in the animal kingdom, based on hierarchies. Then he looked at society and noticed that one of the biggest problems and the main source of wars and violence is when there is confusion as to who stands where, who gets what, who owns what, who is responsible for what. So he concluded that without an established system of hierarchy and authority, there is chaos and confusion which leads to conflict. So society should resemble a pyramid, as they tend to be more solid and sound. This is why the Egyptian pyramids were the tallest man-made structure until the Eiffel Tower was built in 1887. Under Confucianism, not only everyone knows their place, they also know other people's places. So instead of police watching everyone or patrolling the whole society, now everyone watches everyone else. If someone sits in the wrong chair, others can tell him that it's not his seat. So if everyone knows their place, everyone can watch everyone, nobody dares to disrupt the social harmony. Kings are the top of the pyramid and everyone else take their place based on their ranks and age, just like in the game of chess, which also mimics nature. Confucius also realized that everything starts in the family because it's the first line of defense against social chaos. A solid family structure means a solid foundation for a society. Inside the family, the husband is at the top, then the wife, then the sons and daughters. Basically, whoever is older and more capable of violence is higher in the chain. That's how nature works. But how to avoid tyranny? The first line of defense is respect and responsibility. The superior is responsible to protect those beneath them, while the subordinates remain loyal and, most importantly, respectful. A king is responsible to keep people safe, and a man in the family is responsible to protect and provide for his wife and children. It's a tit for tat, or reciprocal, so to speak. The second line of defense against corruption and social decay was to introduce meritocracy. During the Han Dynasty, which lasted from 206 BCE until 220 CE, national civil examination was introduced to allow smart people to rise up the social ranks. Throughout Chinese history, successive empires adopted Confucianism to run society. Even to this day, Singapore is sometimes considered Confucian in its philosophy, hence called a benevolent dictatorship. Even in mainland China, the Communist Party is gearing more and more towards Confucianism, which stands totally opposite to communism, where everyone is supposed to be equal. Confucianism still remains solid despite being 2,500 years old, because nature doesn't really get old. Quote, men's natures are alike. It is their habits that carry them far apart. C. Shackled down. Hinduism also solved the problem of human conflict in the same manner as Confucianism, but in India, the caste system is a little more rigid and less flexible like the Confucian hierarchy. The game of chess was invented in India, which makes sense as people are fixed to the particular role in society, therefore their movements are also fixed. While Hinduism is not a single religion, its core idea comes from the notion that there is a rational order in the universe called Dharma, which means the right way. It's a never-changing order, which explains the caste system. What is the caste system? In ancient India, and even to this day, the people are divided into separate classes where you're born and die. There are 4 main castes and 1 outside. The Brahmins are the priests and the intellectuals at the top of this social hierarchy. Then Kshatriyas, the warriors and politicians or the administrators who run society. Then the Vaishyas are the artists, the merchants and farmer class, and the Shudra, the labor class. The 5th is the Dalit, the untouchable, which is actually the people who are outside the 4 main castes. There is a slight chance you could move up the caste, however, it was a very tiny window and it was not available to the Dalits, who were outsiders. How did the caste system come about? Originally, the Vedic Hindu religions emphasized sacrifices, which could be done by anyone. But over time, only certain individuals or right people could perform the ritual of sacrifice. This became the Brahmin class. Then over time, classes were assigned to different jobs based on how important they were within the political establishment. Then this division of labor was devised to keep everyone in their corners. This allowed less social and political friction, hence less conflict. Hinduism also promoted separation of these classes to avoid being contaminated by those lower than you. You couldn't marry someone from a lower class, so Hinduism created a strict social class hierarchy based on eternal universal order of dharma to keep everyone in their place. So the only way to liberate yourself was to be reincarnated into a higher being. D. Withdraw. Buddhism and Jainism branched out of the same Hindu Vedic religious tradition, but they removed themselves from the gods, but also most crucially from the Hindu caste system. Although the caste system is practiced among the Jains, they don't consider it a religious order, but more a practical sociological order. The Buddhists reject the caste system completely. Instead, the Buddhists believe in the idea of withdrawal from the petty squabbles of society into a small corner to meditate. Not just escape society, but also escape the self, the ego, the endless desires, which force us to compete and fight with others. So to sum up, unlike the ancient Middle East, which focused on powerful gods to conquer and defeat other gods to resolve conflicts, the Eastern civilization of China and India focused on creating robust, rigid social hierarchy in order to prevent conflict. So the West Asian civilizations used their powerful gods to subdue other people and their gods. The East Asian civilizations focused more on the social fabrics, which didn't allow much social mobility or movement. Laozi taught the Chinese to not resist, but to be one with nature. Confucius created a hierarchical society to mimic nature's hierarchy. The Hindu Vedic religions created a more rigid hierarchical caste system to keep everyone in check. So religion was used as a tool to keep peace and harmony within a complex society and civilization. While the Western Asian civilizations focused more on conquest to resolve conflict, the East Asians focused more on self-conquest and accepting their fate. So everyone knew their place. So if you didn't know your place, you simply took a walk into the forest or mountains like the Buddha and Laozi did. Unlike the ancient Middle East, you didn't have to sit and convince or fight others that your God was the good God. Instead, you withdrew. In the next segment, we move to another important question that most religions had to grapple with. How do religions explain death and afterlife? First, I'll look at the cyclical order common among Eastern religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. Then later on, I'll look at Western Asian religions like Judaism, Christianity, Islam, which explain life and death in a more linear order. Seven. Death, cyclical life. In the previous two segments, I looked at the sociological function of religion in resolving human conflicts when humans transition from small groups of hunter-gatherers nomads into immense cities and empires. In ancient West Asia, these conflicts were turned into conflicts among gods, and at the end, it ended with monotheism, like one empire that ruled all the cities. In ancient India and China, however, these urban conflicts were managed through hierarchical system. So religion became instrumental in managing human conflicts through rigid and defined roles. In the next two segments, we move away from religion's sociological purpose to its psychological role and how it explains death. In the first segment, I'll look at the Hindu cyclical order. In the next segment, I'll discuss the linear order of the Middle Eastern religious traditions. A. Hinduism. Hinduism is often considered a way of life because it encompasses a variety of religions and religious traditions. Its origin goes back to the Vedas, a series of religious texts. Thus, Hindu religions are also called Vedic religions. Despite differences of belief, there are some common beliefs that have remained central to all Hindus. Before I tell you what these common beliefs are, let me give you a bit of a background information. Hinduism is a polytheistic religion, meaning they believe in many gods and goddesses. Among these gods, 3 gods are important. Brahma is the creator god, Vishnu is the preserver god, and Shiva is the destroyer god. And they all make what is called Trimurti, or a Hindu trinity. Another important thing to note is that these gods come down to us in many forms or avatars. For example, Brahma, the creator god, has at least 7 different avatars. Vishnu has 10 and Shiva has 19. Also note that in Hinduism, gods can also be female, and the most famous one is Kali, the god of time, death and destruction. Most people mistake cows to be a Hindu god, but it is not true. A cow is a sacred animal among Hindus because it gives you milk, which is sacred nourishment. Even in modern farms, cows are kept alive as a milk source, while the male cows or the bulls are butchered for their meat. Also, you need one bull who can impregnate hundreds of cows. That's why farmers just keep one bull and thousands of cows. According to the Hindu mythology, Purusha is the first man who sacrificed himself to create all life. Therefore, he represents or symbolizes a universal being that lives within all living beings. Purusha and Brahman, the creator god, are the same being. But Purusha symbolizes the universal self or body, while Brahman is the universal soul or spirit that remains eternal. Also important to note that Brahman is also the universe or reality itself, and Atman is the inner self. In other words, what we consider the outside world and its intricate cosmic order in Hinduism is Brahman, while the inner self is Atman. To put simply, the Brahman is the universal soul that resides in the universe, and Atman is the individual soul which resides inside each individual being. But they are made of the same soul. So we are the same in one with the universe. But our senses make us believe that we are separate from the universe. But in reality, we are one and the same thing. This is why the notion of illusion is important in Hinduism. What we see in reality is often an illusion. We are deceived by our senses. Hinduism has 4 core concepts. The first is Dharma, which is translated as the good life or the virtuous way of living. This basically means living in accordance with the cosmic order or the law of the universe. The Indian caste system, which I explained in the previous segment, comes under Dharma as it explains people's placement within the cosmic order. There are many texts explaining Dharma and they are not the same. For example, Dharma Shastra explains this life in 4 stages: learning when you're young, living when raising a family, withdrawing when retiring from work, and detaching when wandering in the forest. Dharma is symbolized by a wheel called Dharma Chakra, which brings me to the second most important Hindu concept. In Hinduism, time is cyclical. So a wheel sitting on the Indian flag today represents that since time is cyclical, so is life. Under samsara or reincarnation, all living beings go through an eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. So the goal for Hindus is to understand this reality, the cosmic order, and to align their action and behavior accordingly. Otherwise, you can become stuck in the wrong order of reincarnation. This brings me to the third important concept of Hinduism. Karma comes from the word karman or kri, meaning work in Sanskrit, which is the same in Persian word kar, meaning work. But in Hinduism, it refers to our actions, behaviors, and intentions and consequences throughout our lives. Today in the West, the word karma is used to refer to bad outcomes in this life. But in Hinduism, our good karma or action in this life can help us with a better rebirth or reincarnation. But is there an escape route from this endless life, death, and rebirth? Yes, there is. For Hindus, the ultimate goal of life is moksha, freedom from reincarnation. To liberate yourself from the endless cycle of life, death, and rebirth, you need to do 3 things. Live a virtuous, enlightened, and desire-free life. So a rational knowledge of reality, good karma, and saying no to your desires can liberate you from the endless cycle of reincarnation. The Hindu texts are called the Vedas, a series of hymns, stories, commentaries, and philosophical explanations. The first series of texts called Upanishads. These are very serious philosophical foundations of Hinduism, which had a huge influence on the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, and his theory of the blind will to life is quite similar to the Hindu notion of the universal will that rules all living and non-living beings. So the Upanishads explain the cosmic reality, Brahman, and core concepts of Hinduism like Dharma, Karma, Samsara, and Moksha. The Brahmana is another important series of Hindu texts which are basically commentaries or interpretations on the Vedas. The third and fourth most important texts are the Mahabharata, the longest poem in the world, and Ramayana. They make up the Hindu myths and stories. So Hinduism encompasses a variety of religious traditions, but at its core it believes in the cyclical nature of time and life. In other words, life is like seasons. We live, we die, we come back, up to repeat the same cycle over and over. Now you see the connection between agriculture and the Hindu religious belief in the cyclical notion of time. This is why Hindus are very chill about life and death. If you miss your train, don't worry. You catch a train in the next reincarnation. B. Buddhism. Buddhism was founded by Siddhartha Gautama, who lived between 563 and 483 BCE. He was a Hindu himself who had a problem with Hinduism. Despite being a wealthy prince, enjoying all the luxuries of life, he understood a simple fact that no matter where you are in life, despite your socioeconomic status, suffering is universal. For our nomadic hunter-gatherer ancestors, survival was the only thing on their mind. But for a rich prince who had everything in this life, he needed psychological comfort about death. Your wealth can protect you in this life, but it cannot protect you from the reality of death. The best way to explain Buddhism is to imagine you spend your entire life collecting precious things, and then imagine you losing them all at once. This is more painful than not having anything. This is why Buddhists think to suffer less, you must detach yourself from the material world. Being born blind at birth is less painful than going blind later on in life. This is why Buddhism is considered a religion of luxury, as it attracts the people who have the material things in life. Buddha was a prince, and today the princes of the world, like pop stars and rich actors, love meditation and their own Zen gardens. While the Buddha accepted the Hindu concept of cyclical time and endless reincarnation, he rejected a few important Hindu concepts. First, the Buddha rejected the Hindu caste system, which put the Brahmin priests at the top of social and religious hierarchy, giving them the full authority to conduct religious rituals and be the go-between you and the gods. Just like the Protestants rejected the authority of the Roman Catholic priests as go-between people and God or heaven, Buddhists did the same thing against the Brahmin priests, who basically held the key to the gods and heavens. With the rejection of the caste system, Buddhists also rejected the Hindu rituals and sacrifices that were very lively, extravagant, and noisy. Instead, Buddhism emphasized meditation, virtues, austerity, quietness, and most importantly, the Four Noble Truths about life's suffering. What are those noble truths? First, while life is impermanent, it is full of suffering. Second, we suffer because of our desires. Third, to end suffering, we must detach from our desires. And finally, to achieve all this, you must follow the path of the enlightenment paved by the Buddha, which is to conquer your desires and remove the self. This helps you liberate yourself from the endless cycle of reincarnation, or simply the endless cycle of suffering. With the rejection of the Brahmin priests, the Buddha also rejected the Hindu concept of God. Since Buddhists believe nothing is permanent, there is no place for a permanent God or soul. This means gods are not necessary in your attempt to free yourself from the cycle of reincarnation. Instead, Buddhists believe you should rely on your own journey to achieve enlightenment. But the most important Buddhist break from Hinduism is the rejection of the Hindu concept of Atman, or the permanent soul that sticks with you for eternity despite the endless reincarnation. In Buddhism, Atman, the permanent soul or self, was replaced with anatta, which means no self. Therefore, Buddhists don't believe in soul or self. So according to Buddhism, nothing is forever, which means why bother getting too attached to anything? But how is it possible that self doesn't exist? Buddhists believe the self exists insofar as it's constructed or made up of all its parts. But in reality, the totality we call the self is nothing but an illusion. We are made up of several changing elements: the physical body, senses, perceptions, ideas, consciousness, and motivations or desires, which are all changeable and wobbly. But by putting them all together, we say it is the self. The self cannot be a solid thing when its parts are constantly changing. So Buddhists believe that the self doesn't exist, but it is hijacked by our desires and urges, which make us to do things like pursue wealth, lust, fame, and power. But none of them make you happy, and the awareness of death only makes suffering more intense. So to avoid suffering, you must detach yourself from your desires and ultimately untie the self or kill the thing called the self. There are two main branches of Buddhism. The Theravada Buddhism, more common in Sri Lanka, Burma, Laos, Thailand, and Cambodia, follows a more orthodox and conservative Buddhism, closer to the Buddha's own philosophy of personal journey towards nirvana, or liberation from the cycle of reincarnation. Mahayana Buddhism, on the other hand, more common in Tibet, China, Korea, and Japan, emphasizes a more communal liberation. In other words, let's help each other to reach nirvana. Zen Buddhism, most common in Japan, is a branch of Mahayana Buddhism and with a strong influence from Taoism, argues that enlightenment is not just a permanent state in nirvana, but it is also possible in this life, in short moments and bursts, by clearing the mind from clutters. To achieve momentary enlightenment, we must create a condition for the mind, for example, a quiet, empty garden, to achieve spontaneous enlightenment that lasts a few moments. For Zen Buddhists, the mind needs to be liberated from stimuli and contents and thoughts. An empty mind is a free mind. An imprisoned mind is always stuck in the past regrets or future anxieties. But a liberated mind is always in the present. So Buddhism rejected the Hindu concept of God, a permanent soul, in order to free individuals from the caste system, the priests, and the endless Hindu rituals. Once freed, you are responsible to pursue enlightenment by detaching yourself from your desires and ultimately detach yourself from the self. See Jainism. Jainism, founded by Mahavira, who lived between 599 to 527 BCE, a contemporary of the Buddha and also from northern parts, and also rejected the notion of deity or gods, but also the hierarchical caste system. But unlike Buddhism, Jains still believe in the permanent soul in the same way Hindus do. But unlike Hinduism, Jainism put the responsibility of achieving freedom from reincarnation on the shoulders of the individual person. Personal autonomy and responsibility are important to Jainism. One of the most unique aspects of Jainism is a strict vegetarian diet due to the belief that we have no right to harm not only other humans but also animals. Unlike Buddhism, which spread to many countries, is almost non-existent in India today, Jainism is exclusively practiced in India and among the Indian diaspora. The social dynamics among the Jains is very similar to the rest of India. D. Sikhism. Sikhism was founded by Guru Nanak, who lived in 1469 to 1539 in Punjab, modern-day Pakistan, which accepts the Hindu concept of reincarnation as well as many rules of Dharma. But Sikhism rejects the Hindu caste system, worshipping of the religious idols, and polytheism. Instead, Sikhs believe in one God called Vaheguru, the Creator God. Sikhs also have a very strong belief in the idea of justice, especially protecting the defenseless in society. Some consider Sikhism to be like a warrior religion because of sword or kirpan is a must-have item for the followers, along with bracelet, untrimmed hair, comb, and a sacred underwear. In addition, Sikhism values honor and courage, which is often associated with the warrior class. Sikhs are also initiated into what's called Khalsa, which means pure and exclusive religious order. The political movement among Sikhs seeking independence from India is called Khalistan, or the land of the pure, just like Pakistan means the land of the clean. So to sum up, the Indian religious traditions believe in a cyclical concept of time and life. In other words, we live, die, and be born, and a cycle that is endless. While Animism was a religion of the hunter-gatherer nomads who were always on the move, Hinduism is the religion of the agricultural aristocrats, educated and sophisticated, who didn't get their hands dirty to grow food and never worried about not having enough food. They just saw how seasons came and went, crops grew and seeds were planted. This is a religion 2.0. Hinduism has a very sophisticated philosophy and a deep rational tradition. In the next segment, we move from a cyclical notion of life and death to a religious tradition that saw time moving in one direction, a linear notion of life and death. We'll move to western part of Asia to discuss Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. 8. Death, linear life. In the previous segment, I discussed the Hindu religions which see the world in cyclical order. Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism all consider the order of life to be cyclical, a series of life, death, and rebirth. In other words, death in these religions is not a big deal because it comes and goes. Also, the Vedic or Hindu religions are either polytheistic in the case of Hinduism, atheistic in the case of Buddhism, Jainism, and monotheistic in the case of Sikhism. In this segment, we move to West Asia to discuss another religious tradition which sees the world in a more linear fashion. Religions like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all consider the order of life and death to be linear, life and death and afterlife. So for these religions, death is a big deal because there is no return to this earth. You only get one chance in this life to get yourself a hotel room in either heaven or hell. Not only is time linear, these religions are also monotheistic. The notion of death in West Asian religions goes back to ancient Egyptians' obsession with death and afterlife. As we all know, one of the biggest and most traumatic realities of life is death. So humans have struggled to understand it. Our life is incredibly short, so to compensate for that, religions had to invent a plot twist which allowed humans to live longer. Life is so short that all religions had to come up with clever ways to prolong our life, either through reincarnation or through afterlife. The Hindus took reincarnation, while the Egyptians and West Asians took the second option, an afterlife that stretched to eternity. But in ancient Egypt, a second life was not available to everyone. Only a handful were able to join the god Osiris for a second life after his death. They were the good people, whose heart weighed less than a feather. Also, it helped if you were rich. So the Egyptians left amazing monuments, including the Great Pyramids, the amazing Book of the Dead, and the treasure chest, and they even mummified the body to preserve them for their next life. So death was a huge business for the Egyptians. It made sense because the pharaohs were filthy rich, and it was such a waste to leave all their wealth behind. So why not take them with you? There had to be another life after death, which included a long, arduous journey. Concepts such as judgment, 10 commandments, afterlife, and more filtered their way into Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. A. Judaism. Judaism, which is a religion, a way of life, and a political ideology, dates its origin to 3,500 years ago. It may have borrowed monotheism from the Iranian religion Zoroastrianism, which is dated back about 4,000 years ago, which I discussed in a previous segment. Originally, the Jews were polytheistic, but ultimately one God, Yahweh, the creator God, the eternal God, and the most compassionate God, triumphed over all the other gods. Also, the concept of good and evil, which exists in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, may have come from Zoroastrianism. In Judaism, the belief that the first humans, Adam and Eve, lived in the Garden of Eden. But after Eve listened to a snake take a bite from the forbidden fruit, apple, which was the tree of knowledge, God punished them and sent them to exile on earth. So basically, humans are here serving our collective punishment for Eve's mistake. But we're not in sin, so we have free will. Once we die, we have the chance to return to heaven, but while we are in exile, we must perform our religious duties. So death in Judaism is simply the soul being released from the body to either travel to hell or heaven. If you're a bad boy, you end up in hell, but the soul never dies. In Judaism, this cosmic exile is not the only one. There was another exile when the Jewish people were expelled from their land by the Babylonians. But God promised them a return to their land. God asked a man from the Mesopotamian city of Ur, named Abraham, whose name has given the title of the Abrahamic religions, to travel to the promised land, Canaan. To this day, this idea, whether myth or real, remains a highly controversial issue in today's geopolitics. So exile is central to Judaism. First, humans were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and the Jews were also kicked out of their land. Judaism is also called the religion of the book. The Torah, or the Hebrew Bible, came directly from God to Moses, the Jewish prophet. It contains stories including the origin story, religious myths, divine doctrines, and moral lessons. One of the most important aspects of Judaism is that Torah explicitly states that the Jews are God's chosen people. While this idea is a common thing among all religions, it is not as central to their religious belief as it is in Judaism. The chosen people basically means that they are tasked to spread the message of God. In a similar way, in Hinduism, the Brahmins are the only ones allowed to conduct religious ceremonies and rituals. Zionism, founded by Theodor Herzl, who lived between 1860 and 1904, a Viennese Jew, back then part of Austro-Hungarian Empire, is an atheistic branch of Judaism. It is the political wing of Judaism today which rules Israel. In the 19th century, the Jews in Europe were heavily discriminated against in countries like Germany, France, Austria, and other Eastern European countries like Russia. So Jewish intellectuals, mostly atheists, started a movement named after Mount Zion to lobby for a homeland. While the Jewish God had promised them this land 3,500 years ago, he wasn't in a rush to fulfill that promise. If God really meant it, he would have fulfilled his promise by now. Instead of waiting or asking God for a land for the Jews, European Zionists asked the real gods of Europe, Great Britain and France, to grant them a land. In 1917, the British finally signed the Balfour Declaration, allowing the European Jews to establish a colony in Palestine. Finally, 3,500 years later, this was achieved with the help of the British. Israel was founded in 1948. It's important to note not all Jews are Zionists. Some Orthodox Jews consider Zionism to be highly anti-Judaism. But Zionism is heavily supported by two groups of Christians. First, evangelical Christians believe the return of Jews to their promised land would facilitate the end of time, so they are called Christian Zionists. The second supporter of Zionism is European and American powers who back Israel, perhaps partly due to the guilt felt after the Holocaust, but partly because Europeans want the Jews to have a home a little further afield from Europe and America. At least that was the intention of the British and the French a century ago. To grant Zionists a homeland in Palestine would mean they would be busy bickering with the Arabs and leave the Europeans and Americans alone. So, Judaism adopted one God as their creator, who in return made them their chosen people. Judaism also sees time in a linear fashion. We are exiled on earth, and one day we return to heaven, and there is no coming back. From a religious perspective, the Jews cannot wait for the end of time, so we can return home. B. Christianity. Some 2,000 years ago, a Jewish man named Yeshua, who later became known as Jesus of Nazareth, just like the Buddha, rebelled against Judaism to start his own religion, Christianity. If you thought the Jews were God's chosen people, for the Christians to make them even more special, God didn't send a message, but actually sent his own very son. Jesus was also the Son of God, who even sacrificed himself for the sins of the Christians. Now, who are the chosen people? Christianity shares a lot with Judaism, just as Buddhism shares a lot with Hinduism. You could say that it's an offshoot of Judaism, but with a few things that are unique. First, in Christianity, while there is one God, just like Judaism, he, however, takes three different forms, each with a particular role. The Christian Trinity includes the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. The Father is the real top G who sent his Son to this world he had created, and the Son is Jesus who came down to bring his Father's message, and the Holy Ghost who has stayed behind, perhaps in the attics with Christians, while Jesus and his Father are not here. Just like in Judaism, Christians also believe in the concepts such as the cosmic exile, the eternal soul, heaven and hell. While these ideas are not fully elaborated in Judaism, Christians have a more clear picture of heaven and hell, body and soul. So after we die, our soul ascends into heaven or hell depending on our deeds during our lifetime. Also, unlike Judaism, the exile from the Garden of Eden weighs heavily on the Christians because they live in sin after Eve's mistake. So all Christians are born in sin. As a result, Christians believe in salvation. It's like being born in prison and you have to prove your innocence. So under the Christian doctrine, we're all guilty before proven innocent. However, this salvation is only possible through the church. Since Jesus is not here to give Christians the message anymore, the church is basically his embassy, which spreads his words to the followers. In the 16th century, however, a movement began in Germany and some parts of France, which rebelled against the church as the only go-between people and God. The Reformation movements, spearheaded by Martin Luther and John Calvin, tried to dislodge the church from holding a monopoly on God and heaven. Protestants believe in a more direct route to God, basically saying that not all roads lead to Rome. With the invention of printing press in Germany, now the Christians could read the Bible themselves, so there is no need for the church to have the master key to salvation in God. This busted a huge myth in Christianity, so now you can be a good Christian even if you didn't believe in the Catholic Church. This opened the Pandora's box. Soon Christians started businesses, conducted science, invented technology, and the rest is history. To make the marriage between Christianity and science official, the German philosopher Friedrich Schleiermacher, who lived between 1768 and 1834, concluded that the Bible and science are totally compatible. Science is based on rationality and answers the how question, while the Bible is based on experience and answers the why questions. But we need both how and why to survive in this world. So to sum up, Christians believe that God is one but takes three forms. Second, Christians believe Jesus is the Son of God. Another difference is food. Christians eat pretty much everything as they lived a bit far north, so nothing really spoils in the cold unlike the desert heat of the Middle East. But Jews don't eat pork, and animals are slaughtered in a certain way, which are the same as our next religion. C. Islam. Islam, founded in 610 CE by Muhammad, who lived between 570 and 632. In the year 622, he and his followers fled to Medina, where they established Islamic rule over the city. This is considered the beginning of Islam. Islam has a lot in common with Christianity and Judaism. For example, they're all Abrahamic, tracing their origin to the prophet Abraham. They're all monotheistic and have a holy book with plenty of common stories and concepts. But there are some major differences as well. One of the biggest differences is that Muhammad claimed he was the last prophet, therefore making Islam the last religion in the Abrahamic tradition. According to the Islamic belief, the Jews and the Christians were the first chosen people, with Moses leading the Jews and Jesus leading the Christians. But both the Jews and Christians failed to lead humanity's salvation because mostly they misinterpreted or corrupted the message of God and failed in their duty to fulfill their role in spreading the message of God. So seeing how they failed, God sent a new message to Muhammad and tasked the Muslims to become the new people of the book to spread God's message. These messages were later collected into a single book, the Quran, which is the Islamic holy book. It is the words of God directly transmitted to the Prophet. It includes core Islamic doctrines, prayers, stories, moral and religious guidelines. It's often read, memorized, and recited by Muslims, not through translation, but in its original Arabic. The Quran also states the 5 pillars of Islam. First, Shahada, which you must profess that there is only one God, Allah, and His Prophet is Muhammad. Second, Salat, which is the act of worship 5 times a day. Third, Zakat is the act of charity, giving food or money to the needy. Fourth, Saum requires Muslims to fast daily from sunrise to sunset during the holy month of Ramadan. And finally, the 5th pillar of Islam is Hajj, a pilgrimage to Mecca in Saudi Arabia at least once in a lifetime. The other major difference between Christianity and Islam is that Muhammad was not only the prophet and the spiritual leader of his community, he was also the political leader for the Muslims. His first religious and political establishment or polity with a clear constitution was Medina, which means the city of the prophet. The constitution laid the rule of law, the duty to fight to defend the city, and keeping peace. How do you keep peace? In case of conflict between individuals or groups, the constitution stated that these conflicts must be referred to Muhammad, who conveyed things from God. In other words, just in the Christian tradition, the authority of a state to resolve human conflict was basically resided not with the humans, but ultimately with God. You resolve human conflicts by giving all the moral and political authority of the society to a non-human entity, i.e. God. Muhammad also introduced a concept known as jihad, which is interpreted as both a physical fight with enemies as well as an internal fight within the self. Of course, jihad was also used to conquer other lands by Muslims. This is why Islam is sometimes called the religion of the sword, as it was spread mostly through conquests. The word Islam means surrender, which can be interpreted as the act of surrendering to God or making sure others surrender too. Another important element of Islam is prohibition of interest charges on loans, which is similar to Judaism. However, the Jewish people are able to charge non-Jews interest. Hence, they are seen as the early capitalists in Europe, which even Marx, a Jew himself, had a big issue with. Muslims and Jews also prohibit the eating of pork, while Christians love eating sausage. Islam also banned alcohol, which is ironic because the word alcohol is in fact Arabic, now used globally to refer to the drinks. In Christianity, the church acts as the God's direct contact with the Christians. In Islam, it is the Imam who acts in the same capacity among Muslims. So Imams are the chosen people to spread the message of God, answer questions, guard the Sharia law, a set of rules that govern Islamic society, and even act as the political leaders after the death of the Prophet. They also act as the guardians of the religion to make sure God's message remains intact. It is not corrupted, like it happened among the Jews and Christians, according to Muslims. In the 20th century, there was a revival in political Islam as European colonialism was coming to an end. First in Egypt, Sayyid Qutb argued that Islam should remove its colonial influence and return to the old Islam. During his travels to Europe, he concluded that colonialism had turned the Islamic world into the Dark Ages, so a new jihad or struggle was necessary to revive Islam. So to sum up, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam believe in a linear notion of time, since these West Asian religions see the world in a linear order. Death is a big deal. In the Indian traditions, life is cyclical. Death is just another event in a series of events. You get many chances. In Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, however, you only get one chance in this life. Once you die, there is no coming back. It's one-way street. This linear notion of time and life, combined with the idea of good versus evil, had a huge influence on modernity as well as colonialism, which spread throughout the world in the last few centuries. So in the next segment, I'll discuss modernity, how it has tried to replace old religions with its own modern shiny religions, all branched out of humanism. Nine, modernity, reason replaces God. In the previous segment, I discussed the journey of religious monotheism, starting with Zoroastrianism, the oldest monotheistic religion still practiced. Christianity and Islam, two of the largest religions today, came from Judaism. Jews were the first chosen people as God promised them land, but Christians were the next as God sent them his own very son to save them. And then Islam came along and God said this is the last message and no more messages, as he was sick and tired of sending messages and humans kept screwing things up. In this segment, I'll discuss how Christianity and to some extent Islam contributed to the rise of modernity, a new baby in the monotheistic tradition, to take over the world, not through faith, but through rationality. If there is only one God, there must also be one truth, and the only way to discover the one truth is to utilize reason and its offspring, science. Solo God gives you a target to focus, but also this religious tradition believes in a linear time, meaning everything moves in one direction, like entropy. So you got to do something, as there is no second reincarnation. A. Fall of Rome. Modernity can be traced to the 15th century, but the invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in 1436 in Germany was also very instrumental, as it allowed more people access to knowledge. This also coincided with one of the biggest events in the history of Christian Europe. The Eastern Roman Empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, fell to the Muslim Turks in 1453. Now, Europe no longer had the longest and most powerful empire, so they shifted their attention from religion to making tools. If the Christian God couldn't save their last empire from the Muslim attack, they better rely on their wit and wisdom to come up with some answers against the Islamic world. The fall of the empire also reminded Europeans of their Greek heritage, because the Roman Empire split into two, the West being Roman and the East being Greek. So Renaissance was the rebirth of a movement that connected 15th century Europe to ancient Greece, where rationality gave birth to philosophy and science. Europe discovered Aristotle and his scientific approach. B. Reformation. In 1521, Martin Luther, a German Catholic priest, began a Reformation movement which claimed that in order to get salvation, the Catholic Church was not required. He found 95 mistakes within the Catholic Church, which led him to believe that for salvation, the Church was more of a hindrance. Protestantism was born. But this was more an economic push than a religious force, as German aristocrats, municipalities, and merchants wanted autonomy so they could tax their citizens, make money, and promote capitalism. With this Reformation came German priests like Schleiermacher, who defended science, saying it is not contradictory to the Bible, claiming that rationality was just another realm of human existence. You could be a faithful Christian, but still apply rationality in order to make money, raise a family, study the universe, make tools, and everything in between. German philosophy, analytical science, technology, and rational thinking began to flourish, especially in Northern Europe and countries which had adopted Protestantism. Scientists like Isaac Newton in England, Gottfried Leibniz in Germany, and others revolutionized our understanding of reality. Now, the story of the Bible, for example, the creation of the world in 6 days, seemed pretty childish in comparison to how scientists were discovering dinosaur bones as old as hundreds of millions of years old. Then, in the 19th century, Friedrich Nietzsche came along to claim that God was dead. A new religion was born. C. Science. Science has tried to explain our origin story, and a lot of it maps onto religious myth, but with different characters, settings, and plots. While religions believe in the soul, science believe in matter. So the main character in science is the physical matter. Today, the most dominant theory or story is the Big Bang theory, arguing that everything began with a bang. There was nothing but singularity. So instead of a single God, there was a single material point which created both space and time, or space-time. This happened not 6,000 years ago as Christians believe, but 13.8 billion years ago. Now that we know where we came from, where are we heading? Is there a heaven awaiting us? Just like Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, science accepts that time is moving in one direction, not cyclical like in Hindu traditions. The second law of thermodynamics is entropy, which means everything is heading towards decay and destruction. This is a slow process, so it takes a long time. All the three Abrahamic religions believe that one day when the world turns into a moral decay, chaos and turmoil, God will send a Messiah who will come and rescue us. But science is not so hopeful because it doesn't believe there is a soul to be rescued. So when we die, we return to the soil we came from. Our body is made up of four main chemical elements: 65% oxygen, 18% carbon, and about 10% hydrogen, and about 4% nitrogen. There is no God to rescue us, and it's up to us to save ourselves. But how do you explain the human consciousness? How do we get from oxygen and carbon and hydrogen to consciousness? This is a hard problem in science. For now, science has no clear answer. Another similar hard question in science is the origin of the universe. What was before the Big Bang? Also, how did life begin? These questions have no clear answers in science. A scientific theory is the modern version of the stories our early ancestors came up with. Who knows what we end up believing or realizing in a few thousand years? While science grapples in the material world, philosophy tries to answer the questions which fall outside the material world, such as morality, the purpose of life, and what we ought to do. Prior to modernity, religion played four distinct roles. First, it was a source of knowledge about the world. Priests were not just men in uniform, they were also intellectuals who could read and write. Second, religion offered community bonds. As a social species, humans are naturally tribal, but it is a loose bond. But with a religion, this bond becomes much stronger, a shared story, a belief that everyone is in it together. This story was so strong that people would sacrifice their own life to defend the belief. Third, religion also offers social rules and how to conduct social relationships like marriage and divorce. And finally, religion gave individuals a meaning to their lives, a purpose and a goal, a return to the single God. Now, science pretty much defeated the intellectual roles of religion. It can no longer compete with the answers science offers about how the world works. The modern state or government took over religion's other two roles. Community bond became the domain of nationalism or patriotism. And the government also regulates society. The only role religion was left with was the meaning and to some extent a sense of community. But consumerism means that people have become eaters and drinkers to console themselves. So how about morality? D. Lutheran reformations also allowed philosophy to flourish in Germany, and a new school of philosophy was established. Humanism was born. Humanists replaced the authority of God with the authority of humans, religious faith with rational science, heaven with political utopias on earth, divine morality with human morality, etc. Instead of waiting for heaven, humanists believe in creating a heaven on earth, where we have freedom, equality, utility, and purpose. In other words, there is no God to help us create a human utopia, and it's up to us to create a society where everyone flourishes. While early humanists were steeped in their Christian lens, later humanists opened their mind to the other parts of the world, especially the discovery of the ancient Indian texts, which revolutionized European thinking. This new way of thinking combined Western philosophy with Hindu philosophy to start an atheistic Western philosophical strand. Arthur Schopenhauer is the pioneer, and then Friedrich Nietzsche built on it to pronounce the death of God. Later on, Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung elaborated with their own theories of the unconscious. So modernity basically married Hindu thoughts into Western philosophy, mainly German, to create a robust political philosophy. Throughout history, religions played the role of an in-house lawyer, advising the kings and generals and everyone else on what is right and what is wrong. When human morality is challenged, the final answer always goes to God. There is no further question. This logical impasse makes life a lot easier, psychologically speaking, because now you don't have to strive to come up with some logical and rational arguments. But humanism replaced religion by arguing that since we humans have invented all religions and the concept of God, we must be capable of doing it without them. The best tool at our disposal is our ability to reason, and reason alone is enough to create a humanist utopia on earth where gods are no longer welcome. To sum up, modernity can be seen as a religion in itself. If animism was religion 1.0, polytheism 2.0, monotheism 3.0, modernity is certainly 4.0. Modernity replaced the father god with mother nature. To survive and thrive, we milk nature for its resources. Modernity has tamed the extremely wild, chaotic mother nature and exploited her rich nutrition and energy. Today, humans pretty much rule the world, but on the inside, we still crave a bigger entity to come and console us in the dark, sleepless nights. In the next segment, I'll discuss why religions still persist despite centuries of rational thinking and humanism. 10. The death of religion. In the previous segment, I discussed how modernity stripped religion of its many roles and also replaced religious morality with a humanist morality. But despite science debunking many religious myths, religion has persisted throughout the world. In this segment, I discussed how religion has adapted to modernity. In 1882, Friedrich Nietzsche said that God was dead. But today, 150 years later, God is still alive and kicking. Today, the majority of humans still believe in the concept of God. So the question is, why is the idea of God so persistent despite centuries of science telling us it is the figment of our own imagination? It comes down to a very simple answer. Science only tells us how nature and the universe work. It's like a microscope that focuses primarily on the material world. When it comes to non-material entities like consciousness, you cannot point to a microscope at it. Consciousness cannot be seen through a scientific lens because it's the lens itself. This remains a scientific mystery. As I said earlier, religion loves a good mystery. If science is a story of how it works, religion is in fact a whodunit story. Science is like a daytime activity, religion is a nighttime activity when things are dark and you can't see things clearly. So long as there are blind spots in science, religion is there to offer answers. There are several reasons why religions have persisted despite scientific discoveries disproving its myths. A. We are storytelling animals. First, one of the biggest reasons religions persist is its never-changing characteristics. A religious story told 3,000 years ago is still told in the same way today. This is not the case with science. Also, scientific explanations like the Big Bang Theory is just a theory. Since science evolves, it keeps changing its story of how the universe works. For example, Newton explained the universe in terms of mass, telling gravity to apply how much force. But Einstein argued that mass tells the fabric of space-time how much to curve or bend. In other words, Newton believed that space was empty, while Einstein believed that space is not empty, but more like a fabric full of property and energy. While science is an evolving story, religions believe the truth never changed. Who doesn't love a story so solid that it never changes? As long as we're humans, we crave great stories. Science is good at analyzing, discovering things, but it lacks the charm and the charisma of a good storyteller. Religion has thousands of years of experience in storytelling, so it still persists as long as we have the same software. Our human software is a story. We understand the world in terms of stories, with a clear beginning, a middle, and end. Religions all have that. Science is always stuck in the middle. B. Mysteries. Second, despite science explaining many things, there are still some things that still remain a mystery, like what is consciousness? How did life begin? What was there before the universe? Why did the universe begin in the first place? These questions have no clear scientific answers. In the absence of clear answer, religion lets you see things. Basically, if you have to reduce religion to one thing, it explains the things which cannot be explained through reason. While science is purely rational, humans are multifaceted, and rationality is only one dimension. We are also driven by passion and emotions. Science looks after our physical being, religion looks after our psychological and emotional beings. Einstein famously said, quote, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." In other words, science lets us pause to see things, but religion motivates us to move. Science makes us hesitate, while a blind passion keeps us going despite the danger. Religion is a joke, and science tries to explain the joke, but humans keep craving a new joke. So we humans are not really driven by rationality, but more so by passion, which tends to be blind. Religion lurks in the darkness and loves mysteries. Third, religion offers free psychotherapy. Another function of religion was confession, which allowed people to tell their secrets they couldn't tell anyone else. Religious confession is a major part of the Catholic Church. It offers release, which is catharsis, so you could unburden yourself from your inner disturbing thoughts. Today, psychotherapy has pretty much replaced that. In fact, Sigmund Freud, the father of modern psychotherapy, or the talking cure as he called it, basically mimicked church to monetize confession. Today is $1 trillion business as more and more people, especially in wealthy countries of Europe and North America, seek therapy. It's no coincidence that religion is perhaps the weakest in these countries. So perhaps lack of religion pushes you or liberates you to make money, but then you need to spend that money on therapy to cope with life, which is pretty cyclical economy. It's interesting that the Buddha understood this thousands of years ago by saying that abundance of material comfort cannot protect you from suffering. Religion is like a good mother who listens to you and comforts you and heals your deepest wounds. Today, your mother is replaced by a psychotherapist. D. Meaninglessness. Fourth, the alternative is not fulfilling. Nihilism is the religion that denies there is a deeper meaning in life, so our only salvation is to enjoy this life. A good example is consumerism today, which is seeking fulfillment and meaning through shopping, consuming, and endless pleasure seeking. To sustain this, we need to work hard, which stresses us out, and to release the stress, we must buy new bags, new clothes, new gadgets, or indulgent food and drinks. It's a vicious cycle that has trapped millions of us today. Today, more and more people feel empty of meaning, which means more work for the therapists and psychiatry clinics. Alcohol, drugs, entertainment, social media do offer distraction, but only for a short time. Deeper questions remain. So you could say, despite centuries of modernity telling us that we are rational, logical beings, we cannot get rid of our demons like addiction to food, drugs, alcohol, games, etc. So no matter how much we try to tell ourselves that there is no meaning in life, it keeps bugging us and keeps cropping up. Consumerism is nothing but an addiction because something else is missing. A deeper meaning or purpose is nothing but a belief that something bigger is at play and that things are getting better, or you are making a difference, or there's a taller mountain you can climb. E. Getting old. Finally, the fifth reason religion will persist is that we all age. We all have a finite amount of time, so our body slows down as we age. In Japan, there is a saying that Japanese are born Shinto, but they die Buddhist. Shinto is animistic and is a religion of this life, and Buddhism is a religion of afterlife. Shinto is the religion of action, goals, ambitions, and conquering the world. Buddhism is the religion of inaction, meditation, and conquering the self. As we age, our body tells us to slow down, your knees buckle under your weight, and your brain fogs more often. This biological change creates psychological consequences. We can no longer compete with the young in the real world, so we seek a deeper meaning in life. So old people turn to religion because the material world was good and dandy when young, but now it's time we find a new anchor. A psychological anchor to our diminishing body. So religion has fulfilled that role for as long as humans remember. It's not just old age. Religion also appeals to the sick and the powerless. Marx famously said that religion is the opiate of the masses. So instead of taking their sword and smashing the rich, the poor people find solace in the church. In other words, religion was a sedative, a pacifier, or a security blanket for those who didn't have a warm blanket. Despite science curing many illnesses, we still suffer from deadly diseases, in the same way our early ancestors experienced suffering. This is why we still believe in superstition. Despite getting schooled for 12 years about how the world works scientifically, most people are still superstitious when it comes to life's big events. Certain colors, items, signs, etc. can make us believe that certain things might or might not happen. For example, if you follow a sports team, you realize that you're pretty superstitious about them winning or losing. So science in general doesn't believe that there is anything else beyond matter. In other words, somehow these chemical elements which make up the human brain become conscious. But the leap is too big, so it is not convincing for many people. So religions fill the void that exists inside the human mind. That void is non-material, therefore it seeks a non-material answer. The human mind is also seeking an answer that fits it. It's a software, so religion has been the human software since the dawn of time, and humans have not changed much. While our material needs have been met, even exceeded, which answers our physical needs like food and shelter, etc., our mind, however, still seeks meaning, purpose for itself. Meaning is not the domain of science, so we seek elsewhere. So to conclude, despite science's effort to debunk religious myths, religion persists in our lives. From superstition to meditation, we all have religious beliefs which we cannot untangle ourselves from. As Carl Jung said, humans come pre-assembled with archetypes, and religions seem to have existed without those archetypes, just like our DNA. Storytelling and religion are so intertwined that we cannot separate one from the other. In our survival, science seems a sharper tool, but it lacks in charisma and a storytelling technique to compete against the emotional power of some religious stories. Science is like a big dude with immense brute force trying to compete with a master storyteller in telling beautiful stories, or a great rap artist who has the words. We humans prefer good stories and often don't care if they are true or not. It makes us feel good or move us to tears. Stories led millions of men to sacrifice their lives, fueled world conquests, and built empires. Science only wipes the tears, but never makes us emotional enough to bring us to tears. Religion is an art form, so it still does it for many people. Religion persists until our brains are so rewired completely that we don't have emotions, we don't respond to stories. Robots most likely won't need religion to motivate them. Conclusion. To conclude this course, in section 1 I discussed how and why religion came about. It answered early humans' questions relating to mysteries and unexplained phenomena like natural disasters and death. Also, I discussed how the concept of God fills the void left by our parents as our creator, protector, ruler, and guide. In section 2, I discussed animism as the first human religions that explain everything through spirits. Since spirits can't be destroyed, they could be channeled to help us survive in this life. Just as science says, the energy cannot be created or destroyed. So animism was a tool of survival, just as energy is today. Animistic religions offered practical and spiritual solutions to the problems of life, but animism also turned dark by taking human sacrifice to the extreme. In section 3, I discussed the second phase of human religions as a form of social control. While animism was the religion of hunter-gatherer nomads and isolated tribes, with the invention of agriculture in Mesopotamia, ancient China, and India, people settled along the rivers. New cities grew bigger and bigger, which introduced a huge problem, social conflict. Since farming made it really difficult to move to another place, as you couldn't abandon your land, you had to settle conflicts somehow. In Eastern religious traditions, they settled this conflict through social hierarchies like the Hindu caste system and the Confucius social relations. If everyone knows their place, there is no confusion, so less conflict. But in West Asian religions, the conflict was resolved among gods. As empires usurped other smaller kingdoms, the big god also usurped smaller gods, which ultimately led to monotheism, a single god who ruled everyone. In section 4, religion moved on to explain the nature of reality. Now humans were rich enough to not only solely focus on material needs, you also needed a good understanding of the bigger picture. In Hindu religions, they took a cyclical approach to the universe. Since monsoon came every year, seasons came and went, it made sense to explain life and death in the same way. In Hindu reincarnation, life, death, and rebirth is an endless cycle. While in West Asian religions, they took a linear approach, saying that once you die, you do not return to earth. You end up in an afterlife, which is forever. In other words, you only get one chance in this life. You screw up, you're done. While in Hinduism, you get many chances. This linear notion also fueled modernity, as in a single truth allowed Europeans to seek knowledge through reason, but also conquer the world through colonialism, which is making everyone like Europe. In section 5, I discuss modernity and how it has tried to replace God with nature, faith with rationality, and spiritualism with materialism. But despite rationality ruling over our material life, we still feel a vacuum when it comes to the mental aspect of life. So traditional religions still play the role of taking care of your spiritual side. Humanism has tried to replace religions with some success in Europe. It has remained the domain of the intellectuals, not the opiate of the masses, as Marx said. So religion-rich communities tend to be materially poorer, while materially richer communities tend to be spiritually poorer. So religion has been an important aspect of human life since the dawn of human species and continues to be an important aspect of our existence. It continues to shape us deeply, especially in our darkest moments in life. It motivates us. So religion is deeply intertwined with our innate being as storytelling animals. If you have made it this far, I salute you. Please leave a comment down below, share this among friends. Thank you very much. See you in heaven. Just kidding, heaven is not for beasts.